more visionary voices today. Mr. Ajay Prakash, who is the Global President of IIPT. He is also the President of TAFI, and the full form for TAFI, I'm sure everybody knows. It is Travel Agents Federation of India. All right. His experience ranges for almost, I think, half my age, more than half my age, 40 years plus. So, welcome, please come. So, put your hands together for Mr. Ajay Prakash, who is going to share his journey with the forum today. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that introduction. I am humbled and honored to be here before you today. It's good to see some old friends who I hadn't seen in a while, and to see a lot of people that we haven't met before, but I think this is the beginning and of a relationship, because I don't think I can, avoid getting to be a SKÅL member now. A special thanks to Dr. Batra. Yes, you did, and I am happy, because the energy that you bring to everything that you do, Doc, is quite phenomenal, and there's something for each one of us to learn from this young man.
Absolutely.
So, most of you are in the tourism business, which is why we're here. It's one of the biggest industries in the world, but it's always been treated as a lightweight industry, especially in our country. I think we all know the numbers in terms of the employment that it generates. It's 1 in every 10 persons is employed in tourism. Globally, and the island economies are different, but globally it accounts for close to 10% of global GDP. In the island economies, it can be as much as 70% and more, because that's all they have. There's nothing that they produce. So this is an industry which goes all the way back to 400 years ago. But today, we're at a crossroads. Because while tourism is well known for the fact that every rupee that is spent on tourism generates 4 or 5 rupees more, the trickle-down effect, the economic effect, the reduction of poverty that it brings, all these are well documented. What is not well documented is that there is another aspect to tourism, which is that this is the only industry in the world that is totally people-centric. We don't produce anything. We don't manufacture anything. What are we doing? We're connecting people. That's all we do. And if we do it right, then there is an exponential power that derives from these connections. But before we go there, let's look at where we stand today. We crossed that 1 billion international tourist mark quite some time ago. We're getting to the 1.5 billion mark. The blip was because of the 2 years of COVID, where everything nobody imagined that the world could come to a halt the way it did, but it did. So, when you look at domestic tourism in India, we're talking about over 2.8 billion people moving across within the country. These are huge numbers. But while you have these numbers, you also have the corresponding backlash. You've seen those posters which say tourists go home. Why? Because of the insensitivity. When you walk into as a tourist, and people do make a distinction between tourist and traveler, but okay, we can leave that aside for the moment. When you walk in as a tourist, because you paid, you don't own that place. It's somebody's home. And that is what we need to be respectful of. Because if we are not, why did Venice suddenly wake up to the fact that they didn't want tourists? The streets are cobbled. Now today, fortunately, I remember the time when we all used to lug our bags or lift our suitcases, all our baggages got wheels. But when you drag those wheels across those cobblestones, it makes one hell of a racket. And people were doing that at night. So the people in Venice said, look, this is my home, I don't want this. Barcelona, same story. You look at our hill stations. A friend of mine who lives in Satal had to go to Haldwani, which is like, 45 minutes drive. It took him 4.5 hours. Because everybody from Delhi is coming in on the weekend into the mountains. And then what do? They'll litter that place. We don't have the garbage disposal systems that we need to have. I mean, we look at Churchgate Station at its peak hour. For somebody who's come from outside, it's like an unbelievable sight, the number of people pouring out of that station. But do we have the systems to handle this? So while we all look at, the numbers, we have to go beyond that. At the end of the day, there is no other home that we have. I mean, Earth is the only home for humanity. Yes, now that Mr. Trump has won the election and Mr. Musk has a free hand, maybe, he's talking about a mission to Mars. But that's still some time off. And it will take a lot of adjustments and a lot of work before any other planet becomes habitable. So this is all we have. And look at what we've done to it. Goa used to be paradise. I started visiting Goa in the late 70s, early 80s. God, it was paradise. And now if you go for a walk on the beach in the morning, what you have is all the litters and the seas thrown back at you. The Goa government thought its salvation lay in bringing in charters. So for 500 pounds, now, pardon my saying this, but the bakers and the butchers of England came in with round-trip airfares, 7-night stay, breakfast taken care of. This is the kind of tourists that they were attracting. High numbers, low value. You overrun the place. They made Goa, and at least the people living near the beaches, they made their homes unlivable for them. Because they thought everybody was, for sale. Whether it was women, whether it was children. This is the kind of tourist that you don't want, and this is where we as an industry have a role to play. So, if you're not going to only chase profit, because the purpose of business is profit. That's what we're all in this business for. But that pursuit of profit needs to be tempered with a sense of responsibility, simply because we are one of the 10 largest industries in the world. $2.8 billion was what they computed for the year which was affected by COVID. That was tourism's potential earnings then. Today, we are far ahead of that figure. But an industry this size, unfortunately, doesn't have a voice. The electronics industry has a voice, the construction industry has a voice, the gems and jewelry industry has a voice. The government listens to them. We formed FAITH, which is the Federation of Associations in Indian Tourism and Hospitality. It's got the 10 top associations, including the Hoteliers Association of India, and FHRA, everybody. The idea was to create one apex body to carry our voice to the government. When service tax, we all made representations. GST, it's ridiculously high. Food and beverages is taxed at the same rate as for the hotel. 18% and 28%, is that a realistic tax? When the government came in with the TCS, we went and met the finance minister, the finance secretary, made a whole representation. At the end of it, what did they do? They said, oh, credit card spend is not being taxed. How do we look at that? So, you go with one thing, you end up with something else. But The idea is that as an industry, we need to make our voice heard. And it's got to be done, the central government, yes, but tourism is not a central subject, it's a state subject. And therefore, when we talk about these things, about lobbying, about trying to get things done, we always tell the associations, lobby at your state level. When you go to ask for a GST reduction, the answer you get is the GST council is controlled by the states. So if there is a proposal that comes from the states, we can consider it, but otherwise the center on its own will not. They've just called a meeting 2 days ago, and they're calling different industry segments. There's a medium level person in the ministry who is collating what different segments, whether it's transporters, whether it's hoteliers, whether it's tour operators, whether it's, whoever. Sorry. So they're collecting this information, but we have to find a unified voice and list out just 3 or 4 things which we get the government to look at. But we're digressing because we're again back to the economics of it, which is what everybody's looked at. So what happened was in 1986, there was a spate of terrorist attacks. It started in Egypt. And that's when a gentleman called Dr. Louis D'Amour, he used to have a consulting practice. And he set up something called IIPT, which is the International Institute for Peace for Tourism. It's founded on 2 very, very simple premises. One, that tourism, which is one of the largest global industries as we discussed, has the potential to become a global peace industry. And number 2, which is simpler but more powerful, is that every tourist is potentially an ambassador for peace. That's all it is founded on. And since 1986 till last year, which was 2023, Louis ran this organization, created chapters across the world, did global conferences. He had everybody from the then Pope to Richard Nixon, who either came in physically or sent video messages to the conferences that Louis did. It was a phenomenal body of work that he did. Unfortunately, it stayed with him. The organization did not grow organically as every organization needs to grow it. It's not a one-person job. So last year, Louis handed over the presidentship of IIPT to me in New York. And what we've done since then is we've added a few more chapters, we're getting a couple more people on the executive board. So the idea is that when nobody thought that tourism had anything to do with peace, Louis D'Amour came up with the idea that tourism can be a powerful force for good and a tool for peace. Now all of us understand that peace is a prerequisite for tourism. If you don't have peace, look at what's happened to Ukraine, look at what's happening to the Holy Land. And of course there's another conflict going on which nobody talks about, which is southern Sudan, where people are dying. And it's not in the news at all. So it's quite evident to everybody that you need peace for tourism. But how does peace, is there a possibility that peace can be a tool for, that tourism can be a force for engendering peace? Now, Colombia had this big civil war going on between the drug mafia and the government. They call themselves the FARC rebels. And 3 years ago, the government, after much discussion, came up with a proposition for these people that instead of dealing in drugs, the government would support them to set up tourism businesses. So it worked to a point. I'd say it worked largely, but again, for a while. They've actually gone back to doing this, what they used to do. It's more lucrative. But there was peace in those regions for those 2 or 3 years when the people who were doing drugs switched to creating tourism businesses. Similarly, we look at Kashmir. I mean, Kashmir is so close to home. Just over the last 1 month, there's again been a spate of incidents, attacks. But for the last 3 years, the number of people that have visited Kashmir is unprecedented. They've never seen that kind of movement. And I was there about a year ago. And you know, people, there is still, of course, a old hurt. But everybody looks at the fact that they're all doing business. They can afford to, send their children to school. They can afford to eat well. They can afford even to travel. All this has made a difference. So when you have tourism, and what is the industry? The industry is tourism, apart from handicrafts. So tourism is what brought prosperity, and that's what brought a modicum or a degree, or at least a substantial degree of peace into Kashmir. So these are real live examples before us. Moving on from there to what do we want to talk about when we say, tourism for tomorrow, tourism for the planet. What this involves is an understanding that tourism has to be holistic in its development. Number one, of course, you need to look out for climate change is a reality. We can all see that. Just 2 days ago, a friend who lives close to Valencia, she was supposed to come for another meeting, which actually started in Athens today. Said, I can't come. I mean, the homes around me are all devastated. We've seen this time and time again in various places. Valencia is just the latest. It happened in Germany, it happened in France, it happened in China, and of course we've also experienced this in our hills. So this kind of senseless exploitation of nature in the name of tourism has to stop. Our politicians and our bureaucrats make these big sanctimonious statements about how, India is the head of the Global Solar Alliance. So on the one hand, you're talking about cutting down on fossil fuels and looking at renewable energy. And then on the other hand, you have the Nicobar Islands, which have some of the most pristine rainforests. And we're going to cut down somewhere between 3 to 5 million. That's 30 lakh to 50 lakh trees. A government body that had a total budget of some 72 crores has now got thousands of crores sanctioned because there's going to be a mega port that's going to be built there, and they're going to build tourism infrastructure. The Maldives, the president made anti-India statements. What do we come up with? Let's develop Maldives and Lakshadweep. Can the Lakshadweep Islands handle that kind of thing? There's a documentary somewhere of, Maldives, it has so many more islands. But there's a few islands which only hold the garbage that is being generated in the islands where there is tourism happening. So, we can't, say one thing and do another because our resources are finite. And we're running out of time if we continue to work this way. I mean, if we don't as an industry come together and think about these things, we might not have an industry to call our own. So this is a serious issue. And it has to start from the ground up. If it happened from the Swachh Bharat campaign, great idea. But how do you implement it? I have a small farm place on the way to, past that Imagica, going to Pali. Every day or every other week when I go, there's a new dhaba or restaurant that's come up. And what are they doing? All the garbage is there on the other side of the road. That's what they're all doing. You stop and you talk to them. Ab kya karega? Kidhar kya karega? Kidhar kya karega also requires a certain amount of government support to be able to take it away. But it also requires you to think about it. At this place where I have my farm thing, it's 200 acres, but there are only about 40 or 50 houses over there, which is beautiful. But these people come in from town with all their lays and their, pan parags and everything. And they leave it there. And you tell them, man, you bring it in, you take it out. At least in the city, there's a garbage disposal. Over here, there's nothing. But this needs all of us to sensitize. We're in this business of connecting with people. I do tours. You have guests in your hotel. You have a restaurant where people come in to eat. It is a responsibility because we're living off this thing. I mean, you don't, it's like sawing off the branch that you're sitting on. Kalidas was supposed to be doing this. So that's what we are doing if we continue in this senseless fashion. Now there are certain, thanks, there are a few things that people have done, which actually, is the way to go forward. There's a company called GHE, Global Himalayan Expeditions, a guy called Paras Lumba. What's he been doing? He's into tourism, but he gets tourists to come in and help him electrify a village or do some high up in Ladakh. So these guys, okay, they get some porters, but these people who come in on his tours will help to carry all that equipment up there, help to set it up. There's a lady called Ishita Khanna, who's got a place in Spiti called the Spiti Ecosphere. Again, what is she doing? Getting local people, getting people from outside, using technology. So you build a greenhouse. Because then, even in the winter months, you can grow fresh vegetables, which you don't get there. So things like this, which people are doing, are helping. Because what we need is not just, take nothing but memories, leave nothing but footsteps. No, we need to go beyond that. We need to look at regenerative tourism. I live in Warsaw. So you go into the village and then there's a smelly creek and there's a boat that takes you across to Mud Island. Very soon, of course, that's going to stop because there's a bridge coming up, which will be the end of mud as it used to be, however. It's a fishing village. Anywhere else in the world, it would be a major tourist attraction. Here it's a smelly thing where you actually don't want to go. Now it's so easy to clean it up. So there's a lady in Jamaica. She heads the Caribbean chapter of IIPT, a lady called Diana McIntyre Pike. She started this thing about 20 years ago, I think. Villages as businesses. So she organized these, starting with one, now there are a few more. The whole idea being, okay, what does the village do? What does it produce? And what can we do to make it more attractive as a tourism product? Tourism is what she's in, so that's what she's looking at. So community-based tourism has much more regenerative power, and it helps the community so that the profits that derive from tourism stay there. Talib Rifai, who used to be the Secretary General of the UNWTO, said this very beautifully. He says you can't have 7-star tourism in a 3-star community. Because if all you're going to do, let's say you go into an island and you acquire the place and you build a hotel and the only place you're going to employ the locals is as your cleaners, then you've done nothing for them. You're basically feeding off them. You're a parasite. Whereas, if you do what many of the hotel chains do, which is to take people, train them, and then give them responsibility, then you're actually benefiting the community. And this has to happen only when all of us believe that it is possible, that tourism has a role to play beyond the greenbacks. Now we've just got a new president who's in the United States. Now this is I mean, this is a reality. The world is so interconnected that all of us were probably wondering and watching as the votes came in. That's the gentleman who, yes, he thinks America first and make America great again, etc. But he's a man who will cut back on renewable energies. I mean, fossil fuels is where it's at for him. Now, this is going to affect all of us. So, if, for example, the tourism industry raised its voice about the situation in the Nicobar and said, look, we strongly disagree with this. This affects India's image also as a responsible country. Then maybe, I mean, there's very little chance, but still it's worth trying, that we raise our voice and say, look, this has to stop. If the tourism industry, yes, everybody needs big cars in America, and they're not bothered about, you know, how much fuel. Kitna deti hai to koi nahi puchta na. So, but the industry needs to react instead of really accepting and trying to profit from whatever comes. So what we need to look at if we're talking about tourism for tomorrow is keep in mind the fact that this earth you didn't inherit from your ancestors. You're actually holding in trust for your children and their children. It's like, you know, our own house. I mean, as a middle class person, you build your house and you want your children to be able to enjoy it. That's what Indians do, you know. You save money all your life and leave it to your children who have a great time. So, I mean, the idea being that if we can look at it at an individual level, then we need to expand that consciousness to look at it at a larger level. And believe me, if we can sensitize our people who travel with us, who stay with us, you know, we have a very small 10-line credo of the peaceful traveler, which IIPT believes in and sends out to people that we can. And it says very simply that, you know, because I am privileged to be able to travel, I, you know, pledge to do the following things, which is to travel with an open mind and a gentle heart, to respect the cultures that I encounter, to appreciate the diversity, to, you know, do these things, and above all, to support businesses that espouse this cause. So I tried at one point, if you remember, we used to have those immigration cards that everybody had to fill out when you came in. So Lalit Pawar used to be the tourism secretary then for the government of India. And I had a long chat with him, and we said, look, on the back of the embarkation or the immigration arrival card, can we print something like this? Because then it goes to every tourist who's coming into your country. And he thought it was a great idea, but then he got transferred, and that was the end of it. So that's how our bureaucracy works. But, for example, like you used to keep the Bible and the Bhagavad Gita in every hotel room, which I don't see anymore. It's fine. I mean, I have no problems with that. But if instead of that, we could place this IIPT credo of the peaceful traveler, which is non-denominational, you know, non-political. All it's saying is, as a human being, I have a certain privilege. Let me exercise it responsibly. So we tried to talk to some hoteliers and said, okay, come in as partners on this and just distribute this, spread the word. We'll say, okay, you know, so-and-so hotel supporting us. We do stuff like, we do awards in Berlin for women in tourism. We call them the Celebrating Her Awards. And we do this in 2016, where every year, well, except for that 1 year where we didn't do it, we pick like about 4 or 5 women from across the world who we feel have not only made themselves successful, but are also like, you know, can be held up as role models because they empower other women and they can inspire them as well. So this is another aspect when we talk about tourism for tomorrow, which is gender. Look, 50% of this world haven't got their due. That's a fact. The Americas, they didn't get the women to vote for like so many years. At least we started with an equal, franchise for everybody. But the fact remains that in this hospitality industry or the tourism industry, 70% of the workforce is women. But I'd say somewhere between 18, max 20% are in managerial positions. That's a huge gender imbalance. So the Taj is doing something about this. We had a long chat the other day with one of them, and they talk about segments where they're looking at least they've achieved close to 50% in some of their departments of gender equality. Now this, apart from being like being a feel-good, do-good thing, it's also a do-good thing for your bottom line, because studies have shown that where you have gender equality, parity, or at least close to parity, those companies have traditionally improved their bottom lines. So this is something that we would like very much for this industry to look at, because this is what sustainability is about. Again, to quote Talib Rifai, he says sustainability is not about the sustainability of tourism or the destination, it is about the sustainability of the human race. And this is what we're talking about here. So what I'm saying is, there is another way to look at tourism, to look at all the good that tourism can do. It's a form of soft cultural diplomacy. When a person comes into your country and goes back happy, they're an ambassador for you. We were known as the land of Buddha and Gandhi and non-violence. That is our core. Of course, apart from the fact that we've got like an international yoga day now. So all this is part of the soft diplomacy, and we are in a unique position as the most populous country in the world today. And aspiring to be the third largest economy in a few years. We have the potential to be true global leaders. And if we are to talk about tourism as a tool for peace, then there is no better country than India from where this movement should spread out across the world. And if we can do that, the entire human race is a winner. That's it. Thank you.
Ajay, I'm going to ask you to stay
Yeah, sure.
there for a minute. Doctor, could you please step up? So when I told you that we had heavyweights that we have had as speakers, Ajay, in the past I wasn't fibbing. So Khalid Rafa is one person, and Alan St. Clair was another person from the WTO that we had an online chat with. We had the privilege to listen to their insight. But thank you so much for sharing your thought process, and I'm sure you converted us all into good ambassadors for travel and responsibility.
God bless you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ajay, for a very thought-provoking talk. It was really wonderful, and we look forward to having you as our member very, very soon.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you, remind you of this evening with us. A small little token of our appreciation.
Thanks so much.
Thank you very much. Some flowers. And may I now request my dear friend Mohit Jain to propose a formal vote of thanks. Mohit, that's a surprise for you, but please come up. And I'm sure you found it stimulating.
Ajay, we hear your pain and we are in full agreement with your sentiments. And we are doing that only, but sadly other forces are creating something. If the problems are more internal, if we have our act together, the world will flock to us. And the people responsible for that are not here. But anyway, thank you Ajay for that very stimulating talk. Thanks to all of you for being here and partaking of his wisdom, and also to the Sahara Star Hotel for their superb hospitality.
Oh, yeah.
And I would also like to give the special mention of Dr. Batra and Thomas, Secretariat, and Dr. Batra for initiating this series of talks and getting people together. Thank you so much, all of you.
Thank you. Very
Thank you very
humble to
much.
be here. Thank you very much.
Yeah. We have time for a couple of questions, so please feel free to answer. Yes, Mudit. Yeah, we have somebody at the back as well, but
Thanks.
Any questions?
Yeah.
Okay, back to
Yeah,
you.
so we hear your pain, Ajay, and we are all in agreement with it. It just shows that we have a work cut out for us. We need to do more of what we are doing so that other people hear and, bang open the door or whatever it takes to do that. Because if our act is in order, this is a multiplier. We all know the common sense. So there's no need to go in it. We have to try to see how to get things done, which requires creative thinking. Thank you.
True. It requires persistent knocking at those doors, and it requires belief. It requires a combination of both.
Sometimes knocking on the door may not help you to do something else.
So then you barge in. Then you barge
Yeah,
in.
I'll take the door.
You have to extend yourself. Behind that word profit, there is something else you should do.
Exactly.
That you have others to understand.
So we have to look at it as a regenerative process, because otherwise we're running out of
It's not
resources.
a one-man job, it's
No.
hands together.
All of us.
Hands together.
That's right.
in Japan,
Gee.
they don't have a single government
Right. I mean, Japan's the amazing.
Good governance, good governance.
Yeah.
Hi. Hi, I'm Vandana Sethi. I run an advertising agency and where we have worked a lot on with Incredible India, Renuka Chaudhary days, and beyond that I've been working with lots of hotel brands. I wanted to understand, is IIPT doing anything for advertising agencies who are working for this segment?
Very honestly, that's not something we look at all. But yeah, I mean, we can. Just haven't looked at it.
Thank you.
Ajay, a point out over here, studying about the service industry. I think the biggest flaw that we have and still persisting, the government does not recognize hospitality or tourism as an industry. The moment it gets into an industry, the labor laws, everything changes, it becomes attractive for people to get into the industry, to work and generate better employment, better salaries, better wages. A big void still exists out there, and this is applicable for hospitality, tourism, and related service industries, which is providing services to corporates, hospitals, education, XYZ,
There are states, I mean, it started with West Bengal, Rajasthan has done it. There are a few states which have accorded industry status to especially hospitality. So this is something, again, it has to be lobbied at the state level. It's not a central government directive. It's a state subject. So, but there are states that have declared, tourism as an industry. Of course, our grounds is that it should also cover tour operators and travel agents, which they're not looking at. They're looking at big ticketed structure development. So, but they're doing it. It's a question of pushing it with the state.
I think Durga Puja is now considered something like a UNESCO. There are some tags.
They're
that
possibly
promote
not-
tourism.
Yeah. No, but I mean, they treat the, if you do an investment, for example, you want to build a hotel, well, if it's declared as an industry, you get loans at a concessional rate, your electricity, everything. So there are states that are doing this.
Any more questions? Somebody mentioned Japan. So I think the recently concluded football World Cup, well, everybody did what they did and walked away. The Japanese were seen picking up
Yes.
garbage, putting it there. So once again, coming back to what you're doing, Ajay, in terms of make yourself, and it all starts with the power of one. So I think each one of us should contribute, and good governance will also prevail. And also, if you go down to the Andaman Nicobar Islands, if you're carrying food in packets from the hotel, especially the Ukraine, they count them, and when you're back on the boat, they count them again. So again, that's self-disciplining, self-imposed form of nature
Ken-
itself.
Kenya is doing the same thing. Kenya doesn't want you to bring any plastic in. We talk about like, finding that Therawala who's given you. Nobody's looking at where is it originating. I mean, if you want to stop it, that's where you go. So talk and action. T.S. Eliot said that between the desire and the spasm falls the shadow. So you talk something, you do something else.
Right. And I also have a farmhouse in Kachhat, and I'm part of the 180 people group. I think it started by Veena, the Lady of Salt.
Okay.
From, I should put you on there.
Okay.
I'm on the committee now to talk about sustainability in terms of how to recycle. So if there's anybody in the house, including the lady who's done some stuff there, and any one of us, let's see what we can do our bit.
Great.
So with that, on behalf of, any more questions?
We have 10 minutes more.
All right. You got 10 more questions? 10 minutes? Ajay, you can take a seat now.
I want to ask Ajay,
Yeah.
also, at some hotels they call it an eco hotel.
Yeah.
Do they get any special benefits because they spend extra money for getting that tag? And
No.
do they get-
See, what is the electrics thing, the LEED, which is like, a lot of ITC hotels have got this certification. But today, not all, more and more younger people who are the growing segment are looking at these aspects. So if you're genuinely eco-friendly instead of just greenwashing, there is a segment that will come to you rather than go elsewhere. So it's also sound business sense, but yes, it costs more.
No, you're not getting any benefits from the government for having that certification. That's my question.
No.
So then there's not a.
No, see, no, but then you look at the business aspect. No? There is a segment that will, and this is growing. Yes, of course, people lie routinely on surveys, especially when, you have to appear nicer than you are. So Booking.com or, one of these guys, TripAdvisor, did this survey of Indian travelers. 54% said that yes, they would go to an eco-friendly place even if it cost more. You're just trying to be like, yeah, but it is happening and it will happen. See, education also comes in over here. I mean, this is something that needs to be, yes, I mean, great, let's teach them the Ramayana and let's teach them the Bhagavad Gita, but let's also teach them that there is something more that they need to do, and which is common sense. See, when I was a kid in school, we studied world history. I mean, I read about the Byzantine Empire in 7th and 8th standard. Today, our kids over here know only the history of Maharashtra. We need to broad base our education system as well. So this is all, tourism doesn't happen in a vacuum. Tourism happens with everything else around it. So that's what
You
it
spoke
is.
of individuals being brand ambassadors. So I think there's a lot of sensitization that needs to be done for Indian travelers, because there's a big brand over there which is like a negative brand. Because when you are part of an Indian group, then you behave so badly.
As a group,
And unfortunately, the Chinese group have also got that kind of branding.
yeah.
So we were in Japan recently, and the first thing we were told is that please talk very softly, because Japanese don't like to talk loudly.
Right.
So even small things like that are very important. You see that happening all over. We've seen it everywhere where Indians go. What is it that you can do in your organization, or we can do as part of Skal, to make sure that we sensitize the kind of Indian tourist, so they start behaving themselves and they start treating themselves as brand ambassadors, because everybody's watching them and they're seeing the way they are behaving. So what can we do to make that better?
It's like it used to be called the ugly American. Well, we do the same thing when we're in a group. On a flight, I mean, a group coming back, oh God. I mean, one guy sitting there, oh, kya kar raha hai? I mean, it goes on all the time. Yes, the passing the khakras. Now, but this is where the tour operator also has a role to play. If you have a group, I mean, a lot of companies do this, they will get the group together before departure and spend an hour or two talking to them about what they should do, what is acceptable, what is not acceptable. This is something that needs to be done by the industry too. We don't do it very often. You got your money, he's got his ticket, he's got his visa, chalo, next. So this is something, so that's where something like, if with every ticket, you send out a little thing, people put disclaimers, but then this should be, whether it's the IIPT, credo of the peaceful traveler, whether it's like, the ethical traveler, how you should behave, just say you're an ambassador for your country. Start from there. But this is something that as an industry, we all need to work on.
Good idea. Good idea. I was about to say that below every meal there is a disclaimer.
Yeah.
So when we give a voucher, travel company gives a voucher, we put a slogan saying,
You're an ambassador for your country?
the travel etiquettes.
Yeah. Yeah, something like that. Gee.
Do all of us know this terminology called peaceful traveler?
Well, that's what we try to do, to spread awareness of this concept.
We must do a mass campaign on this, whatever
Right.
capacity can be
Yeah,
done.
yeah,
As
yeah.
a club, as
Yes. Right. So see, another thing that globally IIPT and SKÅL have done is to create peace parks. Now those peace parks are called the IIPT SKÅL Peace Parks. There's one at Victoria Falls, there's quite a few. I was hoping to get one in Raigad district because the Tehsildar there was very forthcoming. We talked about it, again he got transferred. So, but this is something that we can get, even an existing park. So we can get some corporate interested so that once a month, once in 3 months, there's something that happens at that park which again reiterates that this is an IIPT SKÅL Peace Park. It's something that we can work on together. Then it could be like, a school children thing one day, it could be kids coming and playing music another day, it could be people like you and me just talking to a group of. So if there's an activity, because peace parks have been made by IIPT and SKÅL, and then they languish. Because once it's done, oh, well, it's done, ho gaya, photo le liya, sab ho gaya, chalo.
So Ajay, just adding to your this thing, after Hiroshima, there was a Japanese monk who established pagoda peace parks all over the world, and there are some in India. Initially he was donating money to the government to build it. Then he found it was corruption and he built it himself. And a Japanese monk was there. They are around both Gaya and all. But now coming to the lady's question about peace, I just want to say that I'm saying it I'm not saying it as a flattery, but our President Dr. Batra, he travels all over India and the world, and is an exhibition of photographs of that place, which generates more interest, and then he sells those photos and raises funds for charity.
Right.
So you could think of, because he has it annually, once or twice a year.
Yeah.
So that could be tagged along also as
Actually,
a great initiative
okay.
for, helping, I think he supports children for the blind or some old age.
That's right.
And he does
And
many
there
other
are
things, but I'm
basically-
talking about peaceful tourism. So this dovetails very well in that.
That's a brilliant idea. I mean, Dr. Batra would make a fantastic global ambassador of IIPT. One thing over a person. And full of energy. Good energy at that.
And no transfer.
No transfer, yes. Well, I think that's a capital idea. Yeah.
Central Ministry of Tourism has loads of budgets to spend.
Yeah, but I
Why
mean,
don't they pick up this subject? Can this be lobbied to them? Can this be?
we need to actually go and sit in Delhi. And when you want to go and meet the secretary, they act like they're God's gift to mankind. That's the problem. I mean, in the EU, in Sri Lanka, in Vietnam, you can walk into a minister's office and have a conversation. Here, the Durban will not let you in. So, this is our challenge. I mean, so we had Mr. Nakul Anand as the chairman of Faith. He was the one who could get appointments. I kept trying, I can't get an appointment with the secretary. Who knows Nomad Travels or Ajay Prakash or TAFI? I mean, they don't care. But ministers overseas are human beings. अपने यहाँ तो ये सब माई बाप है. Anyway, if there are no more questions, may I take my mic off? Thank you very much. Thank you all for giving me